So recently I've been playing a lot of old JRPGs that I never really had a chance to play before. And, at this point I decided to make a video about the games I've played. For most of these, well, at some point I started recording all my playthroughs, and you can find all of those recordings in the links below. I have them as playlists on my channel, so you can also find them there. The quality might vary a little bit. There's a few things that I've been experimenting with and some internet problems that I've been having. But if you want to see, there's no commentary or reactions or anything. But if you want to see how I handled some things with a certain game, it's all there. Anyway, as for this tier list, the idea for me is to rank these based on how much I feel like I gained by playing these games now. It's not a tier list about how good each game is. Not not even subjectively, definitely not objectively, but it's more about how I feel about having played this game. If I thought the game was so good that I'm now a fan of the game or a fan of the series, and I'm playing more of the series, I can't wait to play more, then, it does go in the highest tier in that case, because, discovering like a new favorite franchise, of course, that's a huge thing. But also, if a game goes in a lower tier, it doesn't necessarily mean that I think it's bad, but more like I feel like I've maybe played games that are similar, but also do things better, or this game didn't really playing through this game didn't really provide me with anything new, really. It didn't really change my views or anything like that. I enjoy playing a game that just does things differently than what I'm used to. That's when I feel like I'm learning something new. I'm having a unique experience, even if it's not a game that's really gonna be my favorite or anything. Even if I have some gripes with the game, even if it's not really my type of game, if it's a unique experience, then it's nice to have played that, at least that one game. So something like that would go in the middle tier. And of course, there's a few games that I felt like they were like a special experience to me, but I also had some problems with them. So there's a tier for that as well. So with all of that in mind, let's get into it. Mostly in the order that I played these in. Tales of Symphonia was my first Tales game, and I played the GameCube version with Japanese dub. This version looks good and runs smoothly, and has a good selection of settings like separate audio sliders. From a technical perspective, it felt like a really impressive game to me. The game itself is entertaining with decent action RPG combat, but the highlight for me is the character-focused story. There are these kids that play frequently with funny or interesting conversations that also have voice acting if you have the Japanese dub. However, the story itself felt like it kept repeating the same points over and over quite a bit, especially towards the end, so it got a little bit dull on that front. The music is still right in this, but not good enough to keep listening to it after beating the game. So overall, I had a decent time with the game, but it didn't feel that special overall, so I'm not sure if I would play more Tales games, so I put it in the middle tier. Is 1 and 2 Chronicles. I started the first game on the PSP, but after seeing that it runs much smoother on PC, I played the rest of the series there. This game had me excited from the start. You step outside the starting town and this absolutely stellar rock music starts blasting and the energy is just there right from the start. And it doesn't stop there. There are so many other good tracks throughout the game as well. And the series also. The gameplay is simple. You just bump into enemies at a good angle. That way you deal damage to them and don't take damage yourself. But honestly, it matches the energy of the music really well. You just kind of go and, it's just simple fun. Sometimes you need to grind a little bit in this game. You just need to have certain items or you need to be high enough level to be able to beat bosses and so on. But it's fine. It's fast-paced, nice music playing. I don't mind a fast little grind. The game in general is pretty short and sweet, doesn't overstay its welcome. For the simple kind of gameplay that it has, I think that's for the best. My only gripe with the game was that I would sometimes get lost and not be able to find items that I need for progress, so I end up looking up a few things, but not a huge deal. By now, I've already played the latest Falcom developed games from 1 to 7 just because I've enjoyed the series so much, so I truly am glad that I discovered the series. I could talk more about the later entries, but I've already said enough to justify the highest tier. I discovered that there are PS2 remakes for the first 2 Phantasy Star games with English fan translations, so I decided to start the series there. I found the combination of top-down overworlds and first-person dungeon crawling really cool. The original game is one of the oldest JRPGs, so the mechanics are pretty basic, as you might expect. Still, the game had a unique feel to it with some cool music and wasn't too long, so I had a good time overall. So this will go in the middle tier, but maybe Phantasy Star 4 will change it, as I've heard good things about it. I was really excited to try Bahamut Lagoon because it looked like such a hidden Japanese exclusive gem. The premise of the gameplay is that your dragons develop differently based on what you feed them. However, I quickly realized that they all do practically the same things, just different elements. There are very few impactful choices to make. By the end of the game, they'll all be the same anyway. The battles largely revolve around letting your AI-controlled dragons do the heavy lifting, and it's pretty easy, so most of the time you'll win, it'll just take a while. The art and music are great for SNES, and the story seemed interesting enough, so it's not a bad game if you don't mind the simple gameplay. But to me, the gameplay was so uninteresting, slow-paced, and the game overstayed its welcome that it goes to the bottom tier for me. If you're not familiar with it, you might be wondering what Racing Lagoon is doing in a list of JRPGs. It's actually an RPG from Square, produced by Kawazu, who's also behind the SaGa series, which I highly enjoy, so I was quite looking forward to it. You can collect and level up parts to customize and increase the stats of your car. That's kind of where the RPG elements come in. The story also plays out in ways typical to JRPGs, especially ones from Square. What I actually really enjoyed about the game was its storytelling. The visual style of the cutscenes is such peak PS1 with FMVs, frame animations, and full screen art. I've never seen anything quite like that. On top of that, the music is great and fits the game well. The gameplay, however, has some rough edges. Playing this on emulator with save states would have saved me so much trouble, as the loads are lengthy and numerous and there's no quick retry option for phrases, and I did have to retry phrases quite a bit. The opponents feel like they're glued to their tracks and they'll brush off any attempt to push them aside, but they have no problems pushing you into a wall. I also had my share of frustrations due to not understanding cars all that well and playing with suboptimal builds. Despite these struggles, this feels like a very special game, so it belongs into the second highest tier for me. As someone who likes Dark Souls and other FromSoft games, I knew I had to play Kingsfield. I played the original first game with a fan translation, which was practically a launch title for PS1. I did not realize it would be so rough looking while also not running very smoothly. but I guess that's early PS1 for you. The game is only about 30 megabytes in size, so that also kind of explains the way it looks. Even so, I had a great time exploring the world. Finding new things was really exciting in this game. Like if it was a new weapon, you know, I immediately wanted to try it out and they felt unique, and getting upgrades was, it felt really good. Especially when I learned about magic weapons, that took it even further. Unfortunately, I only really learned about those at the very end of the game. But the fact that there are magic weapons that, you know, while attacking, you can press the magic button and it unleashes a special attack, kind of like the arts in later Souls games. I just thought that was really cool, that it's already in this game. Aside from the technical aspects, I wish MP recovery was more accessible earlier on, so the gameplay could be more varied from the start. Despite its simplicity, the way the exploration feels makes it special, so for me it goes into the second highest tier. Being such a renowned game, I could not skip Chrono Trigger. However, I admit I was not very excited for it because I figured it would be very hard for it to live up to the hype it has. I wish I could have gone into this game with no expectations and be positively surprised, but I really couldn't do it that way. There was simply very little that felt unique about it considering my previous experiences with games, but I understand how unique it was at the time, or to someone with less experience with RPGs. The combat felt like a rather standard ATB system, just with the addition of positioning and combination attacks, but neither of them had very interesting implementations. I wish you could move during combat, or that combination attacks were more intricate than just choosing it from the menu. There was also very few real choices to make for party building until endgame, so overall the RPG mechanics were less interesting than I expected. The most interesting thing to me was the seamlessness between movement, cutscenes, and battles. I wouldn't call this a disappointment, as the game was very high quality in all aspects, like music, art, and, you know, just the overall quality of the experience. It just didn't truly bring anything to the table for me personally, so that's why the game goes in its own tier here. After enjoying Is games a lot, I figured I gotta try Trails. I tried the demo of the remake, which already gave a taste of excellent writing and interesting RPG systems, so I decided to start with the original with Japanese dub and perhaps play the remake after. The gameplay is generally the most important aspect of games to me, but the writing in this immediately got my attention. The characters have a lot of personality and feel natural, and they are more complex than fitting into traditional archetypes. Estelle, for example, might seem like a dumb girl archetype that only knows how to fight, but it's more like there are a lot of things she doesn't know, which is understandable for her age and experience. But she's actually pretty quick to learn new things, even if she's overshadowed by Yoshua's unnatural smarts, which is also understandable because he has a mysterious background he doesn't want to talk about. Even so, Estelle often even surprises Yoshua, and Yoshua also makes mistakes. And despite his mysterious background, he's kind, empathetic, and expressive, unlike typical Final Fantasy protagonists. The world feels alive and things are happening because of the people in it. There's a lot of mystery and you get the satisfaction of solving local problems, while also being left with questions about the bigger picture of the story. The Japanese voice acting was also very good and made the story very enjoyable to read and listen. That voice acting also revealed a few lines where Estelle was portrayed kind of differently in the English localization than the original Japanese text, which is a bit off-putting, but other than a few lines here and there, the localization seemed to be very good overall. The game mechanics ended up being less interesting than I thought. especially comparing to the demo of the remake, which seems like it kind of builds upon those mechanics. In this game, magic was just way better than physical most of the time, so it got a bit stale using the same AoE magic pretty much every fight. But still, figuring out builds was interesting enough, and the positioning in battle keeps it varied. And on hard mode, there were occasional battles that were a nice challenge, though sometimes the balancing was not quite there since the harder difficulties were added later on. In any case, I can see why Trails games have such dedicated fans, and I might become one too after this experience, so this goes in the highest tier. When discussing best turn-based combat systems in JRPGs, I often see Grandia mentioned, so I knew I had to try it. Although Grandia III is often criticized for its story, many say it has the best iteration of the Grandia combat system, so I decided to try that. My first reaction upon getting into combat was realizing that it's actually rather similar to the ATB system in FF10-2 and 13, just with pausing the game completely whenever it's any of your turns. It's not really a traditional turn-based system, but that's not important right now. Right after the tutorial section, I quickly got very excited about the combat, as in, I was having some of the most fun with JRPG combat I've ever had. The combat in early game is just absolutely amazing. Lining up actions, aerial combos, cancelling enemy attacks, dodging attacks by ordering a character to move away, delaying an enemy with combo attacks, they're all very satisfying things to do. However, once you get access to some proper spells, most stuff flies out of the window. Now, all that truly matters is getting these huge spells off as much as possible. You have a huge group of enemies, just cast a big AoE and kill them all at once. Even in boss fights, probably just keep using spells. That's generally what was going on. For example, there was a boss I was struggling on. I was trying to be smart with the timeline, cancelling actions, and lining my characters up in a good way. But then I switched the strategy to just take every opportunity I had to cast the strongest spells I have, and I just won that battle right away. I'm surprised by how few people online talk about these balancing issues that I experienced with the game. Even so, even in the latter half of the game, the combat was still more interesting than most JRPGs, to be honest. It's just that the early game was actually phenomenal. Aside from the gameplay, I really enjoyed the music. It truly complemented the combat to give a very strong impression overall from the start. As for the story, I played with the Japanese dub, and the game doesn't have subtitles in the cutscenes, so I didn't understand everything, but I thought the cutscenes were actually really good by themselves. It felt a lot like a theater play with a mix of dramatic and lighthearted moments, which is weirdly enjoyable to me. It's probably a completely different experience than Grandia 1 and 2 that people were familiar with before playing this and then being disappointed. But I thought this game with the Japanese dub, it was really quite good for what it is. So, despite its flaws, Grandia 3 provided a rather unique and unforgettable experience, so to me it goes in the second highest tier. I've known about Atelier games for a long time, but never really know what they are like to play. I don't know how representative Atelier Iris is of the series overall, but I definitely learned a lot from playing it. At first I was surprised by how nice the 2D backgrounds and character sprites are, which seems a little unusual for PS2. Then I was also surprised by how hard the music was going. I've spent some time listening to the music after beating the game. I have a few favorite tracks that I really like from this. The combat was also decently interesting, though most of the time it was quite easy, and at some other times it was a little frustrating. So the balancing I thought was a little weird. The focus on crafting is different than anything I'm used to, so the game definitely offered a unique experience in that sense. However, it did get a little tiring towards the end, trying to collect materials to be able to craft all the things I want. There's a lot of like big chains of things you needed. First you need this, and then you can get that, and then with that you can get that, and you know, a lot of running back and forth. Some side quests also just had you looking for certain things, and it was pretty difficult to find some of those things it was asking for. I think in some cases the translation was maybe not ideal for understanding what the game wanted from me. But anyway, in the end I ended up being more invested in Beola's side story than the main story itself, so I definitely wanted to do that. The main thing holding me back from the rest of the series is that there will probably be more tedious, busy work in the later entries as well. But if nothing else, probably for the music, I will end up trying some other games in the series later on. But all things considered, it goes in the middle tier for now. So I also played Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, but I didn't start recording my playthroughs until after that, but I'm including it in the tier list anyway. So I've never really been into strategy RPGs or tactics games or those kinds of games, but the concept of the game having permadeath for the characters actually really intrigued me. I saw that and I was thinking, it'd be really interesting to just play through the game and accept all the consequences. If a character dies, then they die, and I'm sure the game is designed in a way that you can still keep going. And, coming from the experience of really enjoying SaGa games, I like the idea of the player having a unique experience based on what they choose and how things just happen to turn out. So this game having permadeath kind of played into that idea, and indeed it was quite fun. I had a few deaths along the way. There was one mission that I actually had to reload just because I failed, but everything else I played through it. If somebody died, didn't matter, I would still continue. The game was not particularly hard. I think there were difficulty modes, and I played on, I believe, the normal difficulty, not the highest difficulty in any case, because I thought maybe that would be too brutal if I'm not familiar with the game. In any case, I also enjoyed that the game has this kind of linear structure. There's no grinding involved or anything like that. You just keep going forward, mission to mission, and just dealing with the consequences and all of that. It was a good time, but I also realized after that it's not really my type of game overall. So I wasn't that into playing more games of the series. So in the end, it goes in the middle tier for me. So this is the final tier list for me for now. I will be playing more games. I still have new series to try. For example, Xenogears, Baten Kaitos. Let's see what else about Valkyrie Profile. Though it's the same devs as Star Ocean, which I have played one game. Then again, only one game, and I'm planning to play another Star Ocean game. I still have quite a few games that I haven't tried, quite a few series that I haven't tried at all. And, well, once I start to have played more of the different series, then I'll start thinking more about which of these series I want to play more games of. In any case, my plan is to update the tier list later when I have played more games. and we'll see how things look then.